Hi everyone, welcome to my presentation for my compendium for the JHR program, final year 2025. I focused on media use in social justice and human rights work, going through history up till today. So first we're going to start with about me. I started my work and education journey within the realm of public education. I worked as a paraeducator for a while and then a registered behavior technician. So working with kids who are on the spectrum or just working in special ed department. I really found media interesting in that space. We teach using media, and it's how history is remembered and written. So it was in that place that I started to get intrigued by that, by the words used, the language, the photos, all the pieces of history that we pass down to children, and even to young adults. Every step of the way, our history is remembered through media. From that realm of education, I actually began to work in nonprofits. I wanted to make more of a difference than I felt like I was making. And that furthered my use of modern social media and current content. So I used things like Discord to connect with clients. I fundraised on Twitch, and I used my Twitch platform and other friends' platforms to kind of reach out to a broader range of people on the issues that the clients I worked with faced. I worked with a runaway and homeless youth program and have also worked in in-home ABA therapy spaces. Right now I work for the community college in the area that I live in, so higher education, and it still pertains to that as well. We connect with students through media, and there are issues even in education spaces that are important to social justice and human rights movements. In the short run through, this compendium is not just showcasing my work that I have done throughout the program, but I kind of want to use it to serve as both a warning when it comes to consuming and creating media, as well as a way to introduce media that can be used for good of communities that you may not have thought of before. So there's a combination of both throughout my work and all the studies I have done. A lot of it is a warning. I feel that in this program we have seen a lot of articles and a lot of research on what causes harm. Even when we discuss humanitarian aid, a lot of the pieces of that, while humanitarian aid is necessary and important, we tend to see the media use of it painting people as one-dimensional or two-dimensional beings. And I really think that it is important to understand that media comes from a platform of trauma and of racism, sexism, any other ism that exists that has built a colonized approach to media and to how we interact with other people. The general overview of how this compendium is organized, I wanted to begin with history, and not just the history of media, but the history of our foundations and our system. So it is important to see the societal structure that we have because it dictates how we interact with one another, how we interact in media, and how media is used to uphold those structures and foundations. So I wanted to really dig into where it all came from. And we start with colonization and capitalism and the collective trauma that comes from those. Thinking about Federici's work in Caliban and the Witch and how she discusses this move from feudal to capitalism and what that took from the people at the time. And when I think about her work specifically, what I remember the most about watching her and reading was this common and current kind of undertone in culture to take back the word witch. And she didn't really feel the need to do that because this was a concept that was created to demonize women. Pieces like that are important to know because when we move forward, you don't know that saying "we're the witches that couldn't burn" or any of those other kind of things that are out there, you wouldn't know that they are tied to a structure that is harmful. So paying attention to that was very important to me. Also discussing how having a system that is based on violence, the way colonization is, creates a system that is inherently violent. There is always someone who is seen as below other people, and it is okay to harm them, as we see in necropolitics. So once we go through all of the historical pieces, all the things that are important in that realm, we move into historical media usage. I have a timeline there. I do not need to read through it here, but a timeline of when traditional media outlets were invented, when they were used, and because most of my work is studied from the US, I did note when they were major in the US, how they were used at the time. And how language in media, through that, became very important. There are 3 big companies that ran pretty much all of the television networks at the time. When television first began to be integrated into people's homes, 3 major companies were 93% of the output of content, which means that these 3 companies that again rely on their political societal structure to tell them what to say had control over airwaves. This is not great. And at the time it makes sense. It's a new thing. There are not that many companies out there doing it, but it does create a problem in how information is given. And moving on, there's the worthy sufferer, which I found very important through all of my work. Every time we would discuss communities or people, there was always a version of someone who is worthy of help and a version who is not. And I've always found that strange, and I thought it was something that needed to be looked at, because it is also, it's lifted up by media. Those titles, those expectations are continued in not just documentaries, not just research, but in fictional media as well. So you'll see a lot of fictional media that, even if it's not the point, or it's not on purpose, reinforces those stereotypes of who is worthy and who is not. And I do have a section on that in modern media as well, which we are going to move into in a second. The last thing I really went into with historical pieces are the people in power who are the default saviors. So Western society, the global north, however we want to say that, those countries, my country, the US, is seen as the savior even in places where they shouldn't be. So things happen in our own country that it still feels like we don't ask for help because we are the saviors. And that is damaging both for the people who are suffering and also in the case of how we view ourselves or how the country views itself, because we may not actually be helping. I do focus a bit on, again, within the worthy sufferer, just giving people what we think they need versus asking them what they need. And that ties in to both the savior idea that we hold and the sufferer idea. Excuse me. From there we move into the modern media, which is social media, news outlets, and how those things affect suffering. So I've mentioned it briefly, but networks rely on the structure that is there and the people who run them to create media. So when we think about even late night talk hosts, they give opinions and we may really like them, but there's still a piece of that is part of the structure. So there's just a way that suffering is seen through a window. It was something that was discussed in humanitarian aid as well as other courses, how viewing someone else's suffering, especially in a video format or a photo format, a visual way to see suffering, separates the viewer from the person suffering. And that is both good and bad, as most things with media are. The issue with that is that it feels separated from you, and it doesn't feel like it's a thing that could happen to you. So it's just not the greatest way to look at things. And on the contrary of that, another piece that I touch on is the silence in media and how that can be detrimental to movements. When we did the research course, I focused my final piece, all my work, on the Black Lives Matter movement and how it was discussed from before and then around the time of George Floyd and then after. It should be noted that the Black Lives Matter movement still exists today. And what I found very, very interesting in that study was that there was a span of time where it was not mentioned at all in any of the outlets that we were looking at. And I purposefully kept that within my study because I thought it was very important. There was the incendiary riots calling people crazy articles. There were the applauding the voices of those in need articles. But after the sensation of it stopped, after it was no longer a main focus, it disappeared. No one talked about it anymore. I have actually spoken to them in the last 2 years of this program because they connected to a past job of mine. And they are still there. They're in every, or not every, but most communities, most cities, and they focus on helping Black individuals get jobs, get education, work in the arts. They do many things, but it's not very well known outside of the circles that work in it. And thinking about that, about the silence, about ignoring something that is happening, it's a problem just as much as the way language is used to demonize people. So I did focus a bit on that in my modern media, because it can kill a movement very quickly and is dangerous as well. Finally, as I said, I touch on how fictional work can continue to uphold our standards, uphold the foundations, and uphold the problems that we have had in our society. I mentioned in my project and also in other work that I was thinking of a specific show at the time called Gentified. And the basics of this is that they are a family who has immigrated. And there are many fictional stories like that, usually in a comedy or drama setting. So Fresh Off the Boat is one, Jane the Virgin is another. These stories of immigration of these families and of how they interact with the world around them. But pieces of this, they shed light on things that we may not have seen, and they discuss things that may be uncomfortable to those of us who are privileged enough to not have felt them. I found that very important, and I have found that fictional pieces tend to be more open because it is not black and white. They get to create a story, create a family, create people, and there's always a way to say, well, this is just something that someone else wrote. That's both good and bad, but I find that fiction is a good place to really learn more about other cultures, and I think it is an important piece of media. Finally, I get to predictions and hopes of the future for media. I touch on AI and how AI is being used today, how I hope it will be used in the future or not be used in the future, and what it means in this grand scale of the project of the work of media as a whole. From there, I discuss a little bit other uses as well, like misinformation in our age of information. So it's very easy to get misinformation now, and it's very easy to hear what you want to hear. I don't love that. I don't think we should. I think it needs to be remembered and studied that facts in our world today are not held as facts by everybody. It's become more of a fluid word when it shouldn't be. So just being aware of this access to information, but knowing that not all of it is going to be correct. Finally, my hopes, my personal future for media really sits on social media and how these platforms can be used to do good. I often think about how social justice or human rights movements tend to be circular. The people who are in need, the people who have struggled with something in the past, are the ones who are educating, are the ones who are innovating. But that information is not leaving the community itself. Social media gives us a chance to change that. I have done a good chunk of work with that with harm reduction, where I do my best to talk about it with any group of people I discuss any type of educational piece with. I think it's a very important thing to learn that I didn't know about until I started working a particular job. So I think about the ways that TikTok in general, that's really the big one that the focus is on. TikTok brings information to people on a curated page just for you, where you may see something that you didn't know. I would always recommend double checking information that you see on social media sites, but in general, they can bring communities, more people, they can bring people together who may have felt alone. There is a very big hope that using social media can actually help to make the change that we are hoping to make. In overall, I believe my compendium goes through these different pieces. I really hope my passion for the work continues through there. And I also wanted to just add some highlighted resources that I felt stick with me. Necropolitics was probably one of the first pieces that I read in this program that I really, really connected with and just told everyone about. A World Without Innocence was, I believe, a research article, but it was influential for me. Caliban and the Witch, as noted from before, by Federici, is fantastic. I've actually handed that out to other professionals I know, and they have really enjoyed it. And The Origins of Totalitarianism by Hannah Arendt, focusing on her work with the rights of man, really, really stuck for me. So overall, I think this program has given me so much information and so much to think about and learn and hand out to other people. I'm really, really thankful that I did this. I'm thankful that I was able to do this, and I hope that you enjoy my compendium and this video if you've watched the whole thing.